this is your last and final one. She led you along and you went after her.
What are you talking about?
You slept with her.
I didn't.
You will be honest with me regarding her. Otherwise, I will take your life and hers. Yeah, honey. What's wrong? Mommy doesn't like being lied to. You deserve to die for your lies, as does she. And you will. If you do it again, this is your last and final warning. You don't love me. Really? You don't love me at all. Not even a little bit.
Giselle, get out of my car, please. I need to go.
Come get me. Help me. I have a gun in my hand and I don't want to pull the trigger.
In today's episode, we'll be discussing the case of Michelle Lee, a 26-year-old nursing student from the San Francisco Bay Area in Hayward, California, a city known for its incredibly warm, sunny, and bright weather. Michelle Lee was known for her warm, caring personality, which is one of the many things that inspired her to choose a career in nursing. However, her dreams of helping others and making a difference in the lives of patients would sadly be cut short due to no fault of her own. Michelle Lee was the child of two immigrant parents who migrated to California in the 1970s in hopes of a better life for themselves and their children. The journey of traveling to this country was anything but easy. Despite not knowing English and initially having no family or friends in San Diego, Michelle's parents worked feverishly to support her and her brother. Things would soon improve for the family, enough so that Michelle could live comfortably. Some family members even began migrating to the San Diego area, providing Michelle and her loved ones with a somewhat small yet tight-knit community. Sadly, Michelle's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer and, after a long, courageous battle with the disease, passed away in 1999. Naturally, this negatively impacted Michelle, and she yearned for her mother, but having close cousins around by her side, including her closest cousin, Christine Din, helped her cope with such a significant loss in her life. Those who knew Michelle in her teenage years would say that she took on more of a motherly role when it came to her family. She was also incredibly popular and could get along well with just about anyone. Although many boys were attracted to her, it's almost as if Michelle didn't recognize her own beauty. She never got a big head over all the attention she received. In fact, if friends and family could use one word to describe her, it would be humble. As someone who could easily make friends, it comes as no surprise that when Michelle Lee saw a girl, Giselle Esteban, sitting quietly and alone at a table while at school, she went up to her and talked to her. At that point, she asked Giselle if she would like to eat lunch with her. The rest was history. The two quickly became the best of friends who would do all kinds of things together, including family dinners, sleepovers, and movie nights. Giselle and Michelle had quite a bit in common. Both were children of immigrants who'd migrated to San Diego in search of a better life. They both had hard-working parents and were born in the same year, 1984. It was no shock to anyone who knew both girls that they'd hit it off. As Michelle got older, she looked forward to following in her mother's footsteps to become a nurse, where she could help take care of people and make a difference in their lives. After all, she loved people. So, upon graduating in 2002, Michelle and Giselle both applied to college to complete their prerequisites before going to nursing school. Both girls were accepted to separate colleges, and Michelle did plan on transferring eventually to be closer to Giselle. Their current colleges were just an hour away from one another, but for two young women who enjoy spending plenty of quality time together, this was simply too much time apart. Even so, they knew the importance of focusing on school, so that's exactly what they did until Michelle could transfer to San Francisco State University the following semester. Now that they were going to the same school together, they could spend more time together and start building their social circle while meeting new people. One of the new people they had met was a man named Scott Marasigan. Giselle knew him first since she'd already attended San Francisco State University for a semester before Michelle Lee. However, she quickly introduced the two, and they got along quite well. Michelle and Scott got along so well that they'd even gone on a few dates, but decided they weren't romantically compatible and were better off remaining friends. By the fall of 2003, Giselle started spending more one-on-one time with Scott and would eventually admit to Michelle that she liked him and wanted to date him. Michelle, knowing that she and Scott weren't compatible in a romantic way, had absolutely no problem with Giselle getting with Scott. In fact, she even seemed to encourage it. Within a few months, Giselle was spending nearly all her time with Scott and had little to no time for Michelle. However, this didn't bother Michelle much because she was incredibly busy working on her prerequisites. She wanted to make her dream of becoming a nurse come true and wasn't going to let anything get in the way of that. As the years passed by, Scott and Giselle only got closer. And by 2005, Giselle announced her pregnancy to those closest to her, including Michelle. Michelle was excited for Giselle, even more so after learning she was expecting a baby girl. Now, as you can see, both women were headed in different directions. Michelle was heavily focused on her career, wasn't in a serious relationship, or even thinking about having children at this point. But Giselle was on an entirely different track in life while getting ready to start a family with someone she considered the love of her life. She'd even decided that it was best to take a break from schooling at this point to focus on her pregnancy and welcoming a new bundle of joy to her family. By October, Giselle had given birth and officially decided to start working at a daycare. She'd put her dreams of becoming a nurse on the back burner, believing that working at a daycare would allow her to spend more time with her daughter. At the same time, Michelle was dating a man named Tommy and started working a job at Turner Construction, where she served as the accounting clerk. She took this job on to have a way to pay the bills while going through school. With everything going on in the personal lives of both Michelle and Giselle, it's understandable that they no longer had much time to see each other or do the things they used to do with one another, like going to the movies or simply spending hours on the phone, but that was okay. Michelle understood that their lives were progressing and taking different turns, and she was fine with that. In fact, she looked forward to staying in touch with Giselle via social media. It made it easier for her to keep in quick contact instead of disappearing from Giselle's life simply because she was busy with her relationship, job, and schooling. Both women stayed in touch over the next few years via social media. By 2010, Michelle was accepted into the Samuel Merritt Accelerated Nursing Program. The accelerated program would allow Michelle to earn her BSN in nursing within 12 months, something that typically takes 2 years. As a result of this program, Michelle would need to spend hours studying and working hard to achieve her goal of getting that nursing BSN within a year. Getting into the accelerated program excited Michelle. She had to work hard for it, maintaining a high GPA and excelling in her studies to beat the competition. And because she was so excited about the opportunity, she couldn't wait to share the news with someone she knew would be as excited for her, Giselle. When catching up with Giselle to tell her about getting into the nursing program, Giselle shared some news of her own. She confided in Michelle, letting her know that she and Scott were no longer together and were sharing custody of their daughter, who was now 5. She also mentioned wanting to spend more time with Michelle and get back on track to get into nursing. Michelle, being the good friend she always was, told Giselle she'd be there for her. She didn't want her to feel abandoned, even though she knew this year would be one of the most challenging of all time for her due to the amount of work she'd have to take on in the accelerated nursing program. By 2011, Michelle began working in the labor and delivery ward at Kaiser Permanente, a hospital that provided her with an opportunity to get paid as she learned the ropes, which was another opportunity of a lifetime. Michelle was excited about getting hands-on experience while also making a living, doing what she loved most, nursing. As Memorial Day was approaching in 2011, Michelle was looking forward to the extended holiday where she could catch a break from the daily grind. After all, she'd been working hard at Kaiser to prove herself, and she needed this well-deserved break to kick back and relax. So Michelle made plans to meet up with friends in Reno. It had been such a long time since she'd really gotten to hang out and socialize with those closest to her. After her final evaluation before the Memorial Day weekend, Michelle let one of her instructors know she needed to go to her car to get some medication. Her car was parked in the hospital's garage, so she didn't expect to take very long. By 7 p.m. that day, a security guard contacted the instructor, Rosa, to inform her that Michelle didn't sign out as she normally would when she finished her shift. Rosa was confused by this, so she immediately began looking for Michelle, assuming she was still at the hospital. She'd also decided to send her a text message, hoping to reach her as quickly as possible to make sure everything was okay. But she didn't get a response. By 9 p.m., all the nursing students were gathering to receive their evaluations for the end of the night shift, and Rosa noticed Michelle was nowhere to be found. She expected to see Michelle with the other students at this point and intended to ask her where she was earlier when she hadn't signed out. Rosa began asking around to see if anyone knew where Michelle was, but no one had seen her since she left to get the medication from her car. Rosa believed there may have been a medical emergency, so she decided to head to the parking garage with the security guard to look for Michelle's vehicle. No one was sure what they would find when arriving at the parking garage. It didn't take long for Rosa to realize that Michelle's car was gone, so they walked around the parking garage to see if, by chance, Michelle moved her car. In a matter of minutes, Rosa recognized the white Honda CR-V in the parking garage. She heads toward the vehicle to talk to Michelle, but the vehicle begins backing up. Michelle's vehicle was now driving erratically and leaving the parking garage. Rosa wasn't sure what was happening and thought maybe Michelle was having a medical emergency and needed assistance. However, repeat calls to Michelle continued to go unanswered. By this time, Rosa realized something just wasn't right. So she called the Hayward Police Department to report Michelle missing. She explained the situation to the police department, and although things seemed sketchy, this report didn't take priority because Michelle is an adult. The police eventually arrived at the hospital to talk with Rosa. They found out that she'd left most of her belongings behind, with the exception of her cell phone. It seemed like she had no intention of leaving for good because she left her purse behind. There were many questions, yet no answers. An ex-boyfriend of Michelle's reached out to her close cousin, Christine, and told her that no one could find Michelle. He explained how she seemed to take off and disappear out of thin air. Christine initially assumed that Michelle probably needed a bit of a break due to all of the work she had to handle. However, after calling her numerous times and sending text messages without a response, she started to become worried. Michael, Michelle's brother, also received a message from Michelle's ex about her being missing. He knew that the boyfriend and Michelle had recently broken up and thought maybe he was trying to pull him into some drama of some sort, so he decided not to write back to the text message. After a short while, he went on Facebook, checked out his sister's page, and noticed her friends planned to meet up with her to visit Reno. Later that day, Rosa contacted Michael to tell him she hadn't heard from Michelle, which made this situation much worse. Everyone was getting worried about Michelle, including the authorities, who had realized that no one had heard from Michelle for quite some time. The police found Michelle's vehicle due to anti-theft technology installed inside it, leading them to a gruesome scene. Upon opening the doors of the vehicle, they saw bloodstains and splatters and knew something wasn't right. They also found Giselle's stolen ID badge. No one would hear from Michelle for months. Although she initially went missing in May, it wouldn't be until September that her closest friends and family would learn the harsh reality. If you can recall, Michelle dated a guy named Scott, with whom Giselle would eventually go on to date and have a child. However, when the relationship didn't work out, Giselle started to believe that Scott was secretly in love with Michelle and having an affair. It's thought that Giselle was insanely jealous over the possibility of her friend and lover having an affair to the point that she could not let it go and continued to believe things were going on behind her back for over 6 years. In addition to the thought that Scott could possibly be cheating on her with Michelle, Giselle was also insanely jealous of Michelle's success, having fallen off track herself and dropping out of school during her pregnancy. Things seemed to take a turn for the worse when Scott decided to end the relationship with Giselle. He'd even gained 80% custody, which meant Giselle was losing out on a lot of quality time with her daughter. On Thursday, May 26, 2011, Giselle visited Michelle's nursing school and said she had an appointment with a counselor. In the meantime, Giselle grabbed an employee's badge, left the building, and then used the ID badge to see if she could get back on campus. She walked around the campus, familiarizing herself with the area while trying to get information on Michelle's schedule. During this time, she reached out to the nursing school to ask questions about Michelle and when she'd be at work. The following day, when Michelle was working and went on her break to grab medicine from her car, it's believed that Giselle murdered her, likely stabbing her and dragging her body into her own vehicle. By 7:30 p.m., Giselle called the hospital, pretended to be Michelle, and stated that she wouldn't be back to work for the rest of the night. Giselle then drove Michelle's vehicle to dispose of her body before driving back to the hospital. Giselle drove the vehicle about half a mile from the hospital, dropping it off in the parking lot of a condominium, which is where the authorities would later find the vehicle. The police also interviewed several of Michelle's friends and colleagues to see if they knew of anyone who would want to cause her harm. Ironically, several people mentioned Giselle. You see, apparently their friendship had fallen apart because Giselle began accusing Michelle of seeing Scott behind her back, which was something Michelle was not doing. Before midnight, the police got in touch with Giselle to interview her. At this time, Giselle admitted she was at the hospital, but claimed she was there for healthcare reasons and not to see Michelle. She claimed to have seen Michelle in the parking garage, but didn't have any contact with her. Giselle also stated that she didn't know who Michelle was anymore, believing she had changed and was someone entirely different from the person she once knew and was best friends with for all those years.
I considered her my sister. Since you and Michelle used to be so close, what do you think is going on with her?
I don't know who she is anymore. She made a mistake. Scott made a mistake. Apparently they've been sleeping together.
What's the nature of your relationship with Scott now?
There is no relationship with Scott. He has 80% until July when we have another custody. He only has temporary custody.
You realize how that sounds, right? Did you have any contact with her?
I don't know. I don't recall.
So what medications were you on?
Lithium.
What is your diagnosis? Is it manic depression?
I don't remember what the doctor said.
Giselle continued blurting out details about Michelle, making claims that she'd had sexual intercourse with her daughter's father, Scott. The police wanted to know if Giselle had been in an argument with Michelle, but she simply said, "I don't recall." According to Giselle, her and Michelle had never been friends, even though those who know the two women know this isn't true. So the investigators decided to dig deeper by getting in contact with Scott. They wanted to know what he had to say. According to Scott, he wasn't intimate with Michelle, but Giselle had certainly accused him of being intimate with her over the years. He'd even said that Giselle had threatened him so much so that he decided to get a restraining order for peace of mind. Believing that Giselle likely had something to do with this murder, investigators continued to test evidence and would later find Giselle's DNA on Michelle's steering wheel. If the two weren't friends and Giselle hadn't attacked Michelle, how would the DNA have gotten there? On September 7, 2011, Giselle was arrested and charged with murder, but a body hadn't been found yet, which meant she was arrested due to circumstantial evidence. Later that month, Michelle's remains were discovered in the remote Sunol Canyon. Giselle went to trial in 2012 for the murder of Michelle Lee. An FBI computer expert testified during the trial that Esteban ran roughly 300 searches for Lee's name while researching a broad range of subjects, inducing a heart attack without leaving a trace, following someone without being caught, how to break locks, deadbolts, and doors, and highly toxic gases such as potassium chloride and carbon monoxide. Giselle's lawyer, Andrea Auer, didn't try to dispute that Lee was an innocent victim or that her client was responsible for the death. However, she claimed her client acted in the heat of the moment, committing a crime of passion, and should be convicted solely of voluntary manslaughter. It took the jury 1 week to deliberate, finding Giselle Esteban guilty of murdering Michelle. Giselle Esteban was sentenced to 25 years to life in state prison. In addition, the judge overseeing her case warned her that she will never be paroled if she continues to feel no remorse for murdering the nursing student, who was once her best friend. So, what do you think of this case? Sound off in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for more crime-related content.